Welcome back to the Blessings Podcast, everyone. Today I have with me a guest from New York City, Oswald Perez, and he is a poet living in the city, and he also happens to have cerebral palsy. So we're going to talk about his life, some of the exciting opportunities and challenges that come along with being a poet, and also being someone who is dealing with challenges at times from his cerebral palsy. Welcome, Oswald. I'm so excited to have you here. I'm thrilled to talk to you today.
Thank you, Mitzi, for the introduction. Good evening, everybody.
Can you give us a little bit of an overview of who you are, what else we need to know about you, what you're up to right now?
I am a writer and a poet that lives in New York City. Specifically, I live in Queens. New York City has 5 boroughs. I live in Queens. Trust me, if you see airplanes flying in your vicinity, you're getting close to where I am.
So you have a lot of air traffic.
If it's air traffic, occasionally the planes fly overhead of the house early in the mornings at times. You see the planes taking off. And you see the planes coming in for the landing. Kind of awesome to see the planes take off and land.
I bet it is. That is exciting. And I love your positive reframe. Is it noisy?
Not really. It's more like it's kind of part of the day. It's not an annoyance.
It's all what you get used to, right?
You know,
Yeah. Have you lived in Queens all your life?
I have, yeah.
So
At
you were born
first,
in Queens.
I lived in Flushing for the first 3 years of my life. At City Field, National Tennis Center, Flushing Meadow Park. I lived there for the first 3 years of my life, and now ended up moving to East Elmhurst, which is where we've been ever since.
So you were born in Flushing. And do you still live with your family in the family home?
I do, yeah.
That must be wonderful to have that stability.
It is. I love my family. I adore my sister. She and I are twins, actually. She's the firstborn. I came minutes later.
So you're the
And
baby.
yeah, I am. But these days, I'm doing the best to be on my own too, despite of everything that's happened. I know my family, my parents and my sister love me, support me, and encourage me.
That's amazing. And I want to know more about your family. So is it just you and your sister? Are there any other siblings?
It's just me and my sister.
So the two of you were born in Flushing. And tell me a little bit about your parents and what was happening at that time when you guys were born.
We were born in the States, but my mom's side is Ecuadorian. My dad's side is Cuban. So there's a bit of a mix that's at play here with two different sides of the family in two different countries.
Mhm.
But, they all still ask how me and my sister are doing. And on the occasion, ask us when we're going to go visit them.
So you have relatives in Ecuador and in Cuba.
Yeah, I do.
Have you ever been there to either one of those places?
I've actually been to both places. Ecuador was August 1996. Cuba was July 2010.
What year were you born?
I was born in 1985.
1985. I had just graduated from high school. So you were born in 1985. You were born as a twin. You were born to fantastic parents, one from Ecuador, one from Cuba. Did you speak Spanish in the home?
I speak Spanish only to my mom. I speak English to my dad and my sister. And heaven knows my Spanish could. Here's the thing about that. When I'm in the company of other family members, a common line is sort of that, oh, he doesn't speak Spanish that well. Whereas, say, traveling through Spain a lot later in my life, I don't feel nearly as hesitant to do it in front of strangers.
Oh, isn't that interesting? We feel more comfortable in front of strangers sometimes than the people closest to us.
I know it's a weird phenomenon.
It is. But yet you probably understand Spanish very well. If people were around you speaking Spanish, you'd probably be able to understand everything they were saying.
Yeah, I can understand the conversation. I can read it. I just need Google Translate's help whenever I have to write it. That's when I need Google Translate's help to get my point across.
So, when you were born and you lived those first 3 years in Flushing, can you remember anything from that time?
Only the fact that my sister and I were born 6 weeks premature.
Oh, okay.
My parents did not expect either of us to survive because the birth happened later in their life.
Okay.
So they didn't expect us to survive. The legend goes is that all the babies in the NICU at Flushing Hospital were passing away. All the ones that surrounded us were passing away.
Hmm.
Yet, by some grace, we survived. That story gets told every year on our birthday, comes up every year,
What's your birthday?
December 1st.
Do you know how much you weighed?
I weighed 2 pounds, 7 ounces.
Oh my goodness. 2 pounds, 7 ounces, 6 weeks premature, and here you are thriving.
I know it seems crazy given that circumstance. You would think things would be a lot more dire than they ended up, but somehow I'm on my own 2 feet. Can't really ask for more than that. I know I'll probably hear some friends, you should strive for more out of life.
Yeah, but you're very
But
grateful
when it,
for everything you've got,
yeah,
especially given your circumstances of birth, right?
yeah, I'm grateful for everything that I have, but given all the circumstances, even more so
Yeah.
after the fact that I found out later in life that I ended up getting diagnosed with cerebral palsy.
When did you find out, or when did your parents find out that you had cerebral palsy?
When it comes to the exact timing of it, that's unclear. I just went through a good chunk of, I guess, like I started reading through my individualized education plans during school. These are documents that, because I was a special ed student from about, say, second grade all the way to junior year in high school. So every year I would see the IEP, copy of the IEPs that my teachers would write for me. And that's where I saw the words learning disabled in the description.
You remember reading
So,
that when you were little.
yeah,
How did you feel when you came across that, when you read that?
I didn't really realize it then because I was every other kid at that age, just living in oblivion, just going through school, living through oblivion. But I didn't realize the true depth of it until later in life. I found those IEPs again, and that's when it all became a bit more. That's when all of it began to sink in.
How old do you think you were when you came across those later in your life?
Probably,
Were you still in school
probably,
or after you gotten out of school?
probably gotten out of school
Mhm.
because I just happened to be in the house by myself one day and just happened to come across a stack of the IEPs from elementary school, from middle school, and from high school.
So they were all together. Your parents had kept them together.
Yeah, they kept them all in one place.
Yeah. So you got to understand a little bit better, maybe, what was happening as you were going through school when you looked at it as an adult. What kinds of things were going on in your head when you came to that to to find that stack of stuff? Did you have any epiphanies or revelations?
At least the start, I started seeing the words that my teachers used to describe me:
Mm.
sensitive, overly dependent, tendency to be emotional, tendency to cling on towards my mom, tendency to not take failure really hard.
Did you agree with those things?
I mean, based on my own behaviors, I kind of figured, okay, as much as I did not want to admit it, there might be something to what's being said here. I tended to be one of those, or even the tiniest bit of thing that goes wrong or upset, the tears will come out. I tended to be a bit, tend to get frustrated really easily as a child, and hell, even as an adult, those traits still carry with me. It kills me to have to whenever I let anyone down, it doesn't sit well with me.
So you have a lot of sensitivity.
Yeah,
A
it's
lot
more,
of
and that
empathy.
was more the sensitivity instead of the not so much the empathy. It was more the sensitivity that was more prominent than the empathy, at least then.
When you think back to yourself as a child, after you moved from Flushing to Queens and you must have started school then at that new place. Can you see yourself in kindergarten at that age?
I actually do. And for the fact that I lived in East Elmhurst, I ended up going to school in Long Island City, Queens, which is the closest part of Queens that's practically bordering Manhattan at this point. And there's the one image in the first day at second grade where I was terrified to be separated from my sister for the fact that until this point, we went through day school together. And then after that, we haven't been in the same school since.
So she was in a different school starting from the second grade.
Yeah. And our paths have been kind of separate ever since.
When you think back to that time, what can you say about that? Is there a story you have about that time?
Other than the fact that I it, don't really remember much from that time. Most of my memories begin from the summer of 1994 going onward. I mean, that year, I remember that the New York Rangers lifted the Stanley Cup that year. I remember that the FIFA World Cup was hosted in the United States, and the Knicks got to Game 7 of the NBA Finals that year too.
1994. So you're a lot of details from 94. So you were 9 years old?
Yeah, that
S-
and the Pepsi cans with the Woodstock '94 logo on them that came out during that summer.
Well, isn't that interesting? So if you're 9 years old, you're probably in what grade?
I graduated elementary school
Maybe fourth
during the
grade?
yeah. I went to elementary school from grades 2 to 5.
So in grade two, you were separated from your sister and you were going to a different school. Was this because of the IEPs and the learning
I
disability needs?
I don't remember exactly why. That might have been it, but I don't remember the exact reason.
Did you feel alone?
Yeah, because it was in a way starting over. Didn't know anyone, didn't know my classmates, teachers, any of them. And was reluctant to engage. I
Did
was
you make
reluctant to
friends?
eventually, yeah, because that's the thing. Some of the friends I have, we went through elementary, middle, and high school together because we're all in the similar boat. Some of us, we went through the same places together,
How would you describe that boat that you're in?
like those cerebral palsy, like me, those spina bifida, eventually my closest friends, lupus. So it was all kind of classified by the various physical and learning disabilities.
But you did have some good friends. And I love the way that you say you're still friends today. That's rare.
I mean, granted, I admit I could be a better friend than I am because I keep to myself a lot.
You keep
And
to yourself.
occasionally, yeah, I'll pop up for the birthday wish or depending on the particular post. I was kind of grateful that social media exists for the fact that how bad it supposedly it is. I'm glad social media exists now because still able to keep those friendships together, which otherwise in the pre-internet age, all those friendships would have disappeared.
Yeah, I think you're right. There are a lot of positives to social media. I think it's something that if you structure it yourself and you're intentional about how you use it, it can be very positive. I've met a lot of wonderful people on social media who I don't know in real life yet or haven't met them yet. And I'm extremely grateful for that. You're one of those people.
Thank you.
So, when you graduated from elementary school and a lot of cool things were happening in New York, some of those sports related things and just some cultural things you remember that were going on. That's really interesting. You
And
got interested in sports and culture at that age. What was that all about?
I, the usual, I know at the time, for example, my dad worked in the Bronx, not far from Yankee Stadium. So he took my sister and I to a Yankee game during the '95 season. I don't remember the exact day of it. I know it was a Sunday afternoon and they played the Milwaukee Brewers and lost the game that day. I don't remember the exact score of it off the top of my head either.
Do you remember being there in the stadium?
Kind of. I know we were a bit higher up in seating, we were higher up. And it was in the second iteration of Yankee Stadium, not the one that's there now. And
It's
at this,
really cool to be living in New York City where you have access to those types of things. Are there
I,
any other things you did as a child that you got to do just because you live in that place in New York?
I remember I got to see the Ringling Brothers Circus at Madison Square Garden. I remember it happened. I just still remember the details are a little bit fuzzy. I know we took a class trip there,
Did you
and also
see the performances, the animal performances, the
I I I,
acrobats?
I did.
That's exciting. So you went there on a school trip. Very cool.
Yeah,
And so as you started to get older, do you remember anything from your middle school or high school days that stands out?
I do. I remember that less than 2 weeks into middle school, I had surgery on my right leg. When it comes to the most profound complication of cerebral palsy was in my legs. Taking it back a little bit, at 3 years old, I had surgery on both legs because they were both turned in. Unfortunately, a complication happened during surgery where the wrong tendon was cut on the right leg, and it ended up exacerbating the problem for years to the point where for sessions of for orthopedics, braces, physical therapy, I couldn't really wear cool looking shoes because I had a brace stuck to my right leg. And I went into September 1996, starting middle school, barely 2 weeks in, I had another surgery on that leg, on
So
my
that
right
must have been
leg.
pretty difficult.
Yeah, I remember the neon green cast on my leg and the walking boot, which I came
Mm.
back in 2 weeks later, just after Game 6 of the 1996 World Series, which the Yankees beat Atlanta for their first title since 1978. I don't know what, it just happens to be part of the story
I love that you identify a lot of those milestones in your life with those sports activities. Why? What's that all about?
because I just remember that night, multiple TVs were on that night. I guess it's more, I know my dad growing up in Cuba, big on track and field, big in boxing. Baseball's practically the religion because Christianity was not recognized as official religion until 1998, prior to Pope John Paul II's visit to Havana.
So because your dad is from Cuba and he loved baseball because it had a lot of significance, but how does the Christianity tie in?
Because I kind of say baseball's the unofficial religion. I kind of make the point that they couldn't practice actually practice religion, so they had to find something and move that. And also on my mom's side too, Ecuador is a soccer heavy country with, it was just growing up like you have the basketball hoop in the backyard, you're using the garage door, the makeshift goal, hoping that you don't break any of the windows that are on top of the garage. Been as much a part of my life as anything really.
So baseball, soccer, doing a little bit of basketball, shooting basketball in your yard. How was that for you given the problems that you had with your leg?
I admit after a while, like, I eventually stopped because I was always fearful that I would injure myself. And the last thing I wanted to do is see another operating room. I had already seen my share of ORs throughout my lifetime. I'm not going to do it deliberately.
You were pretty careful about not doing activities where you could hurt yourself.
Exactly. I was trying to be as careful as I could.
And then when you got into high school, what were you into at that time?
When I got into high school, I guess I was still trying to find what exactly interested me. I killed it in history. The Regents exams for New York State that every high schooler has to take in order to graduate. Of all the Regents exams I took, the history ones were the ones I blew out of the water by a wide margin, to the point where the head of the social studies department gave me his permission to take the United States history regions before everyone else could. I did really well. And then I was offered the opportunity to take AP history, which in hindsight, I realize now that I could have saved myself a few credits in college by taking that on instead of letting my limitations keep me from doing it.
So you got the opportunity to take it, but you declined?
I declined AP history. I was afraid that I was going to fail, and then I end up failing, only make my teacher look bad. She, she thought I could do it. I just didn't think I could.
Oh, that's too bad. So you had a fear of failure.
Yeah, that the fear of failure reared its head at that moment.
Can you think of any other times when that might have happened when you were a teenager? Was that a pattern, something that you noticed in your
Yeah,
life?
yes, that was a pattern that started back in elementary school.
Mm.
It was the third grade spelling bee, and I was the one that got kicked out of our class to do it. I skipped recess to prepare for this. I thought to myself, I was gonna pull this off. The day comes. The word is chimney. I spell it Chimey, and was the first one eliminated. And I loved my classmates and my teacher, but I did not want to hear any other consolation. It felt like I embarrassed myself in front of the entire third grade class that afternoon. I did not no amount of consolation that they could provide could make the moment better.
Yeah. Do you think that's where it
And
started? That was the origination of the fear of failure?
that's exactly that's the first example that I remember, the clearest example of fear of failure. Yeah, that's where it begins.
And now that you have identified that, have you started to integrate that in a way that helps you to overcome the fear of failure now as an adult?
I mean, I kind of use that moment to motivate myself until I need to succeed in everything I do. I mean, this on top of the fact that the cerebral palsy, the bar of expectations was kind of low already because of that. Now add this onto that, and I just felt even more like I had to prove myself to everyone. I don't know what exactly I had to prove. I just knew I had to prove something to everyone that I'm not as limited as
Mm,
everyone thinks I am.
that's profound. I mean, that's really profound. You have been through your whole school experience where you want to prove that you can do more than what people are expecting of you.
Yeah, that was exactly for what it's worth. I ended up seventh grade again honor roll once, which was junior Arista in seventh grade, and then eventually I won a specific prize back in at fifth grade graduation, and eventually in high school I finished in the top 100 of my class of 578. I finished 60th out of
Wow,
578.
that's awesome. So you had some triumphs. I want to know how your cerebral palsy showed itself. What was it doing in your life? How did it show up? What did it do?
The cerebral palsy worked the image of myself. It got made fun of a lot, whether it be my buck teeth, the fact that like body odor because deodorant was only just starting to be a thing around that time for me. And it wasn't just the boys that did it, it was both boys and girls,
Yeah.
to the point where I sort of began to isolate myself in a way that still kind of rears its head today in a way.
Yeah. That's very painful. And having bullies, people who are mean to you when you're in school, and especially because of something you have no control over.
Yeah.
How did you deal with it? Well, you self isolated.
Yeah, that mostly what I did. Like writing was not a way that I used to deal with it until deal with anything until much later in my life. It wasn't part of my life then.
So you didn't really have a coping mechanism other than just to withdraw.
Yeah, because I don't know, it's just when you have aggressive people, people who are a bit more aggressive than you are in your life, and you're just the quiet one of the lot. You don't really have any much else to turn to.
Did you have a support system in your family?
I mean, when it comes to, there was kind of a bit of home life. It was just kind of loud. Everyone's the loud voice. Everyone's like a bit more front in their presence than I was. So it was just nerve wracking to say to the parents or my sister, "Oh, this is what's bothering me." Just felt that sense of fear that, oh, I'm not going to get listened to.
So you didn't really speak up for yourself. You couldn't.
No, I just felt that sense of fear of speaking up for myself would inevitably end up causing greater problems, and they're already would make the situation worse than it was.
So what happened after you graduated from high school?
When it comes to high school, I got accepted to John Jay College of Criminal Justice. Mind you, the with the CUNY application, I had Hunter College, Queens College, and Lehman College as the first three, but my SAT scores were not enough to qualify for any of those options. So it was either John Jay, Queensboro Community College, or LaGuardia Community College. And I remember this well. My dad kind of was steering me to stay in Queens because they were afraid that if anything would have happened to you, we would be able to get to you easier if you stayed in Queens. And even though I didn't say anything, that pretty much swayed my decision towards John Jay easily.
So your parents, even though you weren't able to tell them that you were going through a tough time, they were obviously really protective of you.
Yeah,
What do you think they would say if they knew then that you were going through that difficulty, being bullied?
maybe there would be a bit more understanding.
They probably would have. But, I hear that a lot. People who are in the teenage years and they're going through a tough time, they have people in their lives who are mistreating them or they have bullies, and they just don't know how to speak up. They don't speak up. They hold it in.
And it didn't help that that had a speech impediment on top of this, which didn't help because my thoughts would take a little bit more time to catch up before they come out of my mouth. So every now and again, it'll be like they're expecting me to say something and then nothing comes out of my mouth at the exact moment. And I just kind of standoffish because I do not want to get upset because everyone's rushing me to speak when I don't have my thoughts together.
I understand. That must have felt pretty frustrating.
It felt frustrating because don't really have anyone around that everyone did the best they could. I don't expect everyone to be familiar with the ins and outs of having cerebral palsy. And heaven knows everyone did the best they could given the circumstances.
Yeah. People should know that sometimes people who have cerebral palsy just are taking a little bit more time to gather their thoughts and match that up with the words that are going to come out. And that maybe
Exactly.
just to have patience.
Yes. That that the words are there. It's just they don't come out as quickly as everyone else.
Yeah. That's really good for people to know and to understand. When you went to college, what were you studying?
Initially, I applied as a public administration. My bachelor's was in public administration, but after taking public administration 101 and getting a D in the class, I knew that I do not want to keep going down this road. So I switched. I was briefly an associate's degree student at that time. It was the fall of 2005. So I was a brief associate studies in criminal justice. Once I got through the necessary testing requirements for upperclassmen out of the way, I switched back to my bachelor's degree in criminal justice fully.
So you got a bachelor's degree in criminal justice. And what did you want to do with that? What was your plan for your career?
Honestly, when it came for the plans for career, I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. Everyone assumed, oh, because it's criminal justice, you end up joining the NYPD. No, I am not in the best of my physical limitations. Probably would not make that a good place for me. But on top of the physical limitations, I am a bit sensitive to loud noises. Case in point, the 4th of July is my least favorite day of the entire year. Because it's fireworks going off at all hours of the day and night, and I'm doing my best trying not to panic.
So loud noises are really troubling for you. Do you have any other sensitivities? Do you have any sensitivities to different textures or foods, things like that?
I know I can't eat seafood or and shellfish. That's not a good combination for me. And also with my eyes, I am farsighted. Meaning I can see close, but if you put something away from my eyes, I'm not gonna be able to see it because I
Okay.
had eye surgery too at 3 months old, but there was a bit of a complication that happened during the surgery, which kind of permanently blurred the vision in my left eye.
So you've had a lot of physical difficulties your whole life. Yeah.
Yeah, that's been a running theme of my life, the physical difficulty.
How do you deal with it?
For a while, I struggled to deal with it. Like I did not wear shorts or go barefoot because I was so self-conscious. Because on my right leg, there are 7 places on my right leg that have scars on them. And in the 3 toes of my right foot, you see the remains of pin marks that pins got placed in the middle toes too. So it's just, I didn't want to show my legs to anyone because I was afraid I would get made fun of for the amount of scars on my leg.
When you were growing up, was there anyone who empowered you? Anybody who was a hero to you?
That would be my sister. I will say this from now to my last dying breath. I worship my sister. She's my hero. She, I think every day of my life that I was born a twin, I would not have survived life as an only child.
Does your sister have any of the difficulties that you have?
She doesn't, but I don't hold any resentment or anger or anything like that because of that fact. It's more, I'm grateful that she's part of my life.
What kind of things does she do to show her support and love for you?
And that she's the one person in the house I feel comfortable talking to because I don't have that sense of fear that, oh, if I say anything, that there's going to be the long lecture or the sense of fear involved. It's just being able to have someone's ear.
She'll just listen to you. She just has unconditional acceptance.
Yeah,
And that's wonderful to have somebody like that just built into your life.
that's true. And plus, if it wasn't for my sister, I wouldn't love traveling as much as I do. I wouldn't love live events as much as I do. Everything, she blazed the trail for me.
Tell us a little bit about your traveling. You mentioned a story in your Facebook about the first time that you traveled by yourself. Can you talk about what
I
travel means to you and what role it plays in your life?
travel is the one thing I try to build into every year. I know you can't see to my left. I have a giant vertical map of the world laid out. I have maps of the London Underground above me, a map of Great Britain, strictly of all the soccer teams. I have a postcard print of Capri in Italy on the door. I have a portrait of Venice on one other side of me that I'm looking at right now. And traveling is the thing that brings life to me. Traveling is the type of
Mhm.
thing where I have James Michener's Iberia on my bookshelf. So Francis May's Under the Tuscan Sun, Peter Mail's A Year in Provence. Half my bookshelf is just travel memoirs and travel guide.
So, what's your favorite place that you have traveled to?
Right now, it's a bit of a split between Nice, France, and Barcelona, Spain.
And so did you take those trips by yourself?
Yes, both of those trips were on escorted tours.
What was it the first time that you did that on your own?
The first time, it was 2015, and my sister is partially to thank for this because I remember she told me of her plans to go to Hawaii for her 30th birthday, and I did everything I could to get on this trip, but it was girls only. And then after the brief moment of being bummed out about that fact, the next thing that came out of my mouth was that I still wanted to travel. I wanted it was 30th birthday gift. I wanted to travel, and she suggested the escorted tour idea.
And so what was that trip? Where would you go?
I ended up in Spain. It was 8 days in November 2015. The trip started in Madrid, stopped in Granada, and then Seville before coming back to Madrid.
That must have been spectacular.
It was, although it was a little anxiety inducing because the trip happened 2 days after the attacks at the among others, the Bataclan in Paris happened the Friday. I left for Spain on the Sunday. So it was on my mind. And the fact that I had 3 years before that, I had traveled with my sister to Paris and London. So naturally, aside from the sense of grief, what happened in Paris that night, it happened 2 days before I left to Spain, so naturally the sense of fear was heightened even more, on top of the fact that it was my first trip by myself. Up until this point, I had only flown to Chicago as my sister and I and a few friends of hers. We took a Labor Day trip to Chicago for Labor Day weekend, but my sister and I flew out of LaGuardia from separate flights. So we didn't meet up until we both landed at O'Hare.
That must
We
have been a little nerve-wracking, but you ended up having a great trip, and you
I
found
did
out that you could do something that you didn't realize you could do.
I did. There I was on that first day. I made it to the Puerto del Sol, and I found the kilometer zero marker and placed both feet on it. And I
Mhm.
just took a look around at the square that I would see because the Televisión Española, which is a Spanish state broadcaster, they broadcast the New Year's Eve celebration from the Puerto Sol live. I would watch it because midnight Central European time is 6 p.m. Eastern. And there I was in the square, that same square without the crush of people, but
On your own.
yeah, on my own. Although the town hall building was draped in black because of the Paris attacks.
What did you find out about yourself on that trip?
Aside from the fact that I could be on my own 2 feet traveling in another country, I took mass transit. The Atocha rail station was not far from our hotel. So I was able to buy the metro ticket and just there I was. The first stop was the Reina Sofia, 11 a.m. the morning of the 16th, room 206, where Picasso's work is located. And there I am by myself, no one in the room, and me just marveling at this gigantic masterwork that Pablo Picasso painted in the reaction to the bombing of Guernica during the Spanish Civil War.
That must have been a pivotal moment in your life.
It was. I could see why he was adamant that Guernica not come back to Spain until democracy was restored.
So a lot going on in the world, a lot going on with you personally. I feel there are a lot of metaphors there.
There are. And then basically later that week, get, just go Toledo was beautiful. On the day we left Madrid, it was so foggy. I don't know how our driver was able to see anything. But by the time we made it to Toledo, the sun was out. It was mid-November. It was like, really warm.
Sounds
And
beautiful.
then it only gets better. When we get to Granada, the Alhambra, that was the part of the trip I waited for. I wanted to do more than anything. And just walking through the Cape, I could see why the Moors. This was their seat of power. It's beauty everywhere you look.
Did this
Finally, when you get
inspire you? Were you doing any writing now at this time in your life?
I didn't do the writing until after I got home. Just me and my camera taking pictures of absolutely everything I could.
Bringing home those memories. And then when you got home and you were able to process that trip, how were you changed?
I felt a sense of accomplishment. I managed to get through the trip, and despite all my worst fears, managed to survive the trip. The one thing was, though, I took the 8-day trip. There was another optional Barcelona extension that I could have taken but didn't. So there I am sitting on the plane on the flight home to Madrid, hatching the plan. I'm not satisfied that I had to be the first one to leave on the last day while everyone else got to go to Barcelona. So naturally, a few months later, the return trip to Spain, starting in Barcelona, was booked for the following October.
So you went back.
Yeah, I had unfinished business.
And now you had a sense of courage.
Yeah, that okay, I can afford to do it. I pushing this all the way down to the back end of the year with enough time that no one's gonna like give me the third degree regarding taking time off. I had that. I know what I was doing.
How did your parents feel when you did this travel?
Of course, they were worried because it's their youngest traveling on his own. Because I have this memory of me getting lost as a little kid. My sister and I guess we were out together, and my sister and my mom could not find me. Naturally, they were terrified.
They were
And also
terrified.
this, yeah, they eventually caught up with me
Where were you?
somewhere along Junction Boulevard, which is the main drag, not far from where I am. That's the main shopping drag. Of course, my parents were worried.
But you did
I
it.
was,
And you probably showed them and made them feel better too about the things that you could do on your own.
I did it. And also because of the fact that I moved up the trip 2 weeks earlier than I initially anticipated. The plan for that trip was I would leave November 29th, be back in New York December 6th. I would have spent my 30th in Madrid, but I kind of chickened out on that idea because the moment I say anything to them, that's going to be, I do not want them rating on my parade for this.
Mm.
So I pushed the trip to the week before things, 1 week before Thanksgiving, and mercifully saved myself the conversation that happened on the car ride home from JFK, where my dad's, "Hey, sister, spending your birthday in Hawaii." Um, yeah, that I know she's spending birthday in Hawaii, and I'm not mad.
You've had some nice trips. And so where else have you gone that has been fantastic?
So after that first Spain trip, I went back in 2017 to Ireland,
Mm.
2018 to Portugal, 2019, I ended up back in France for a longer, back in 2012, it was just only 4 days in Paris and then took the Eurostar to London. This time, it was a full 13-day trip that started in Paris, ended up in Nice. And then 2022, last September was Italy, which was a holdover from 2020.
Yeah. So you got to travel to Italy. And then what's on the agenda for this year? Anything?
Yes. In September, late September, I'm going to Greece.
That's fantastic. All right. And then what about 2024? What's your plan for that?
Probably like toward Belgium, Netherlands, kind of the Benelux region, because I have one other piece of unfinished business. The
Oh,
French trip from 2019 was not supposed to be the destination I was going to travel to. Back
mm,
then, my sister and I had planned a Rhine River cruise, which would have, of all places, taken us to the Keukenhof Gardens outside of Amsterdam in the midst of tulip season. But the timing didn't work out. Although I ended up in France, eventually gave me the window to book the France trip, Belgium, Netherlands,
mhm.
in that part of the world, probably for 24 and 2025. I said this silently to myself on the flight back to Madrid the first time in 2015. The 40th birthday, I am coming back to Spain. that December.
So 2025 is going to be your 40th birthday and you're going back to
Yeah,
Spain. It feels
I
like you
pretty
got
much
some kind of, there's some kind of a vibe there, like an empowering vibe in Spain for you.
it is. I read the Cervantes Don Quixote. The Plaza de España in Madrid. They have this monument to Cervantes, and on the side of it, it's Don Quixote and Sancho Panza riding alongside. And Spain does feel a sense of empowerment. I felt comfortable enough to be able to speak Spanish there and not feel nearly as self-conscious about it as if I would speaking to family.
There's definitely something about that place for you. There must be something there. There's something magical there. I want to know after you have a chance to think about it, what, maybe what you come up with. What is it about that place?
What is it about the peninsula? I guess like good food, really good wine, the sea, whether it be the Atlantic. Portugal, you're facing the Atlantic. France and Spain, you're facing the Mediterranean. Architecture everywhere. You have Gaudi's influence in Barcelona. You have the azulejo everywhere you look in Portugal. If you look on the streets, on the sides of buildings in France, you have walking through the gardens of Monet, walking in Giverny, living through history on the beaches in Normandy. Unless
Yeah.
I forget, seeing the Eiffel Tower
Mm.
shimmering in the night sky. There's no better view than that.
There's a feeling that you get. I haven't seen all of those places, but I've seen some of them, and it takes your breath away.
It does. It did all three of those separately. France and Spain, I visited twice.
And so when did this translate into poetry for you? When did you start writing poetry?
When I started writing poetry, initially was as a kid. I would write messages for Mother's Day, Father's Day cards. I would have to go to Google Translate to help translate the English message and the Spanish for my mom. And sadly, I still do that today. I'm not even gonna hide that fact that I write the message in English first and then run it through Google Translate right before I write it into the card. And that's where it began. Eventually, we had to move the timeline up to senior year of high school. It was English class, probably December of 2002. I was given a found poetry exercise by my teacher, Ms. Levy. And when I got the paper back, I noticed she wrote in the margins, Oswald, you're a poet. I had no idea what she was talking about. She saved my hide because of a history paper that was due, but my computer was broken. Computer wasn't working. I
Mm.
couldn't print it for the life of me. And I was looking at a not so happy Christmas because I did not get my paper in on time. She enters the room all white, dressed in all white, almost like an angel with glasses, with my paper just before the end of the period that morning. She saved my Christmas.
Would you say she's one of your heroes?
Is aside from the fact that the whole eternal argument who's better, Led Zeppelin or the Beatles. I'm initially an avowed Beatlemaniac. I have a giant poster of Sir Paul McCartney that's not in this shot, although
Uh,
I'm moving my camera, tilting it over, and you get
yeah,
so I'm an avowed Beatlemaniac.
okay.
But now I learned to love both. So
Oh.
sense of late, poetic discovery, she saved my hide, and someone who I can share a musical wavelength with.
Mm.
Can't do much better than that for a teacher.
A lot of us have that special teacher. It's just really wonderful to have someone like that in your life. People need to know about others who have disabilities. What do you think people need to understand about that? And especially how to treat people with kindness and respect.
You look past the disability, that there's a person there above all else. We're all the same person.
How do you deal with people who have trouble being kind?
Just try to be patient. Okay. Don't want a tendency to not cause a scene whenever someone's not being kind to me. Just try not to take it personally. I know I say this and I need to follow this part of my advice more often than I do, but I need to learn not to take things so personally.
Mhm.
It's just purely their own frustration, anger, or what have you of the situation, and not a reflection of me as a person.
No, you're mirroring something in them. And so it's very kind of you to have that attitude, that compassion, because you understand there's something about them. Do you run into a lot of bullies as an adult, or do you find life to be pretty peaceful?
I mean, when it comes to bullies, not so much bullies, it's more people that are really aggressive and upfront and aggressive.
You like things to be very quiet.
Yeah, I'm not the type of person. I don't yelling. It just frustrates me when, for example, dad has the TV on downstairs and it's really loud, and like, if I have to yell to get my point across, I'm not doing that.
Yeah, it's understandable. You're a very kind and gentle person. You have such a beautiful energy about you in that way.
I trust you. I try. I don't mean people harm. It's not my nature to be deliberately terrible to people. I guess it's just the fact that having it done to me as a kid, I don't want to repeat that as an adult.
Yeah. You don't want to be that person
No,
because you know how hurtful it is.
it is.
Well, I hope that people who are listening will understand that lesson because I think that's a big one.
Yeah.
When you're writing your poetry, what does it do for you? How does it feed your soul?
Poetry is my way of getting my feelings out. It's
Mhm.
the words are cathartic for me. You can just put whatever I'm feeling onto the page. And yeah, there are times where it gets a little heavy where I'm doing kind of reading myself through my poetry. And yeah, at times I do worry my friends and family because I tend to not show as much empathy or kindness to myself that I do to everyone else.
Yeah. You're hard on yourself.
Yeah, I am.
But it's taking the form of that person who you didn't have to talk to when you were younger.
Yeah.
And it must give you some
I
satisfaction to have an
just
outlet in that way. You don't need to hold everything
the
in
words.
anymore.
No, I don't have to hold everything in. I put it all out there. Yeah, at times it's gonna come off really negative, but that's how I'm feeling at the moment that I come across the poem.
But you have to get it out. When you repress things, then they just continue to fester. So having an outlet, writing poetry is really important, especially for somebody who's been through some difficult times.
It took me a while to eventually embrace writing as a way to cope as a moment of catharsis.
Yeah.
Where I would go to college, I had a blog site that I would kind of daily journal for a while, but then I stopped. But then it was a brief playwriting phase where I would just sit around at Borders and the Time Warner Center in between classes and pick up the play, go to the play section of the bookstore, and just write out a future for myself in short play format. And then eventually I would come back to writing, start my second version of my blog. And then eventually I would just come back around to doing poetry as my main mode of catharsis.
And the more you do it, the better you get at it, right?
I don't know. When it comes, I could be better at when I'm writing. I admit that's the one thing about this. So I'm surprised that people resonate with my words. I just get taken aback by that fact. People find something in my words that they get shared, commented, hell, even read. I know we're getting into the more recent days now. We're in January 2020. I took Kathy Heller's course, Made to Do This. And 9 weeks in, I did all the homework. I was one of the calls she had one-on-one conversation in front of everyone else that night. This night is borderline me. It's a kind of urban legend at this point. And I nearly walked away from the moment. I was terrified because I didn't have anything to show for it. After 9 weeks and quite a bit of money put in, there wasn't much there. And then in the course of one conversation with Kathy, she brings out the mantra, words are art. And then the next day, I download Canva onto my devices. I write my first poem on there. I guess it was still the momentum of everyone seeing the whole moment of eureka right in front of their eyes happening. But it's from that moment, I haven't looked back.
What are your dreams for yourself?
My dreams for myself. I know that in the end, I do see myself living on the Iberian Peninsula on a more permanent basis. I've been going back and forth between Portugal, Spain, and France for which country it would be. But I do see myself living on the peninsula in the end.
What are you doing for a living? Are you a
I'm still writing and writing, kind of taking a bit after James Michener on this one, where he has these books, Iberia, Texas, Alaska, Hawaii, in that vein, with a little bit of Francis May's Under the Tuscan Sun and a little bit of my own augmented words and my poetry in there too.
Do you have a poem that you could share with us right now?
I do actually. It came through last night as I realized that yesterday was 100 days into 2023. So this poem, I wrote it last night. I haven't posted it yet anywhere. And it goes something like this: 100 days into 2023. My, how time flies by. The soundtrack of the year has changed from the strains of Johann Strauss to my inner leader writing a new song, a new job, and a newfound focus as I begin to step into my power on the long road to becoming an independent adult. My words resonating more by being in new places and seen by new faces. An odd space I occupy these days in between stability and uncertainty.
I think that perfectly sums up our entire conversation, Oswald.
Thank you. Yeah, it came up last night. I was just thinking the fact that it was 100 days into the year. And I started thinking about how everything seemed to change from New Year's night. I mentioned Johann Strauss because on New Year's Day, I went to the Salute to Vienna concert at Lincoln Center. I'm a classical neophyte, but every New Year's Day without fail, I watch the Vienna Philharmonic's New Year's concert on PBS every year. And it's one thing to see the Blue Danube and the Radetzky March on screen, quite another physically be in the room as you hear the claps go round at the end of the Radetzky March.
Lincoln Center is a magical place.
It is Lincoln Center, Central Park, and yes, even Times Square. I know with all the tourists and costume characters around, I know you're not expecting me to say that, but Broadway theaters and restaurants lined around in the theater district, it has its own magic. New York
Mhm.
City is a magical place. Don't let the negative headlines that get tossed around and the negative connotations that come with New York City deter the crossroads of the world for a reason.
It's all about your perspective.
Exactly.
You could choose to focus on the positive things.
I try. There's already way too much negativity in the world as it is.
Yes. So, how do you stay so positive? What are your tips?
My tips: find yourself company, keep the negative people and thoughts and ideas out of your sphere. I write. I listen to music. Music, along with travel and sports, music is the other thing that brings joy to life.
What's your favorite kind of music to listen to?
I'm a rock and roller at heart, but there's room for jazz. Whereas my music collection, for example, in there you can find Davis's Sketches of Spain. You can find Black Sabbath's debut. You can find an Edith Piaf collection in there. And you could also find an English language version of Rossini's The Barber of Seville, which I got to see on New Year's Night 2016. Granted, because my sister got tickets for us both as a Christmas gift. But
Yes.
granted, like, you can look back at a party. I went to a New Year's Eve party the night before. I fell asleep about midway through the first act, and this was an abridged version of the show, mind you.
And it's funny. So, what's the greatest song of all time?
And also in my musical, very song of all time, The Kinks' Waterloo Sunset. Ray
Ooh,
Davies does not get nearly enough credit. The Kinks, for that matter, when you're in the midst of the British invasion, Beatles, Stone, Led Zeppelin, The Who, get lost in the midst of all that. The Kinks did not get nearly enough credit for their music. Ray Davies does not get nearly enough credit for his songwriting. And Waterloo Sunset to me as melancholy never sounded so beautiful.
as soon as we get finished, I'm going to go ahead and listen to that song. Let's talk about what are your biggest lessons in your life. What are the most important things that you have learned in life?
The most important things I've learned in life. I'm capable of a lot more than I give myself credit for. I always expect the worst of all the situations, and I'm pleasantly surprised when things have a habit of working out in the end. And even if they don't work out, there's still something to be gleaned from those moments that could spur up something else.
My favorite quote: life is happening for you, not to.
Or in it said another way, with thanks to John Lennon, life is what happens when you're busy making other plans.
That's right. And what about your blessings? The things that you're grateful for? What are those?
I'm grateful for my sister. I'm grateful for my parents. I'm grateful that I'm able to enjoy life when I so choose to. I know I need to get out of my room a bit more than I do. But when I do get out of here, I feel the sense of joy and wonder of the world that is outside the store. I'm grateful for the sense of wanderlust that I have in me. I want to set foot in all seven continents before my life is done.
That's great. What do you say to people to give them the inspiration to overcome their perceived limitations?
What do I say? The limitations are just one piece of it. It's not all of you. It's just one piece of it. And there's so much more that makes a person who they are.
That's very beautifully said. And what do you think in life is the most important thing?
The most important thing in life. I know trying to think of the answer.
If you didn't have to think about it, what would be the first thing that popped into your mind?
The most important thing in life is to embrace every inch of yourself. Yeah, there are going to be things you're not going to, for example, in my case, yeah, I have all the scars everywhere, feet, my neck, which that scar on my neck is the one reason I'm alive at this point. I'm not kidding. They put the feeding tube because of the swallowing difficulties. At first, they had to put the feeding tube through the neck to help gain weight. And yeah, the left eye is blurred. You can't see much out of it, but a vague outline of the place I'm in right now. But I embrace all of it. On the beach, you'll never see me with my shirt off. I don't have enough confidence in me to do that. But even then, I try to embrace everything that I am.
Self love.
Yeah, it took a long time for me to eventually come around to that.
Yeah. It can take your whole life. Well, Oswald, it's been such a beautiful conversation with you. And I'm just really grateful for everything that you've shared with me. And I know that everyone is going to love reaching out and connecting with you on your social media to see your poetry and to hear you and see more of your writing as you become known for it. You remind me a lot of Rupi Kaur. You know her books?
Yeah,
Yeah. I could see you writing a book like that.
thank you. I appreciate Harrison.
I can see that.
When it came to the poems, I never expected to have people resonate with them to the extent that they do. I grateful to the end of the earth that people do.
Sometimes it takes other people seeing something special in you for you to be able to see it in yourself.
Ain't that the truth?
And I see it. You're a
You.
very special guy.
Thank
So
you.
thanks, Oswald. And I really appreciate your time and your beautiful vulnerability. And I can't wait to see what happens in your life.
Thank you, Mitzi, so much for this opportunity. This is one of those times where I actually went after something. Usually, I'm the type of person that needs to be pushed into doing something. And I'm glad that I took this opportunity. And thank you for giving me the chance for this conversation. I enjoyed it. And I hope that everyone that listens to this when it comes out, I hope they do too.
I know they will. They're going to love you. The world is going to love you, Oswald, when they get to know that you're here and see your beautiful work.